Good morning, grade fives. Welcome to your English lesson for today. My name is Miss Kun. I am very excited to be teaching you today, and I will be teaching you English for the next couple of lessons. I'm very honored to be your teacher today. This lesson is brought to you by WorksheetCloud, and remember that any questions that you have throughout this lesson, maybe make a note of them and then please email your questions to grade5@worksheetcloud.com. Okay, are you ready for our lesson today? Today, we are going to be looking at poetry. So poetry is one of my favorite aspects of English to actually teach because of how complex poetry is and how it is an element of English that also just allows your mind to be so creative and just to close your eyes and you read a poem. You visualize what is happening with the poem, and we are going to be looking at that today. So are you ready? Okay. Good. So our objectives today, we're going to be looking specifically at what is poetry. We're going to be looking at two types of poetry. We're going to be analyzing poetry because there are various different components that actually make up a poem. And then we are going to end off by looking at an example of a poem with some questions. And it is a poem called Sick. And I think when we get to it, there is a lot of you that are sitting at home thinking, I can relate to this poem. So we'll get into that and you'll see a little bit later. Right, so let's start off. What exactly is poetry? Now, poetry is a form of writing that can express emotions. It can tell a story. It can create an image or simply play with word sounds and forms. Poetry doesn't always have to follow standard rules of punctuation and capitalization. So that is a little bit of a leeway for some of you that forget your capital letters and your full stops and whatnot. So that is a plus side for you that, it is a plus side about poetry, which is really great. Okay, now we're going to be looking at two types of poems. Now we can classify poems according to number one, if they are known as a free verse, or number two, if they are known as a rhyming poem. So let's first look at a free verse poem. I'm going to read the poem with you. In winter, all the singing is in the tops of the trees where the wind bird, with its white eyes, shoves and pushes among the branches like any of us. How beautiful. Short, sweet, and it doesn't rhyme. And so because it doesn't rhyme, we say it is a free verse poem. It's no definite rhyme scheme, but there's a clear rhythm. Don't you like the way that the poet has just used such beautiful language to describe the actual tree? I love it. Right, the second poem I'm going to read, I only copied the first two stanzas because this poem is quite long. It goes like this. School is where I spend long hours, learning the world's legends and stories. I learn of the wonders of ancient times. I learn of Greek and Roman glories. I travel into the dusty past, and from their tombs the king arise. I take a trip with some fair queen. I dine beneath those long gone skies. So as you would have noticed in the first stanza, stories and glories rhyme, and in the second stanza, arise and skies rhyme. And so this type of poem we say is a rhyming poem because there is a definite rhyme scheme with the ending words in a line. Right, so we have a free verse poem or rhyming poetry. Right, the next part of this lesson we are going to be analyzing poetry. Now there are 8 components of poetry, and I am going to go into detail or at least explain each one a little bit. So we are going to be looking at the image of poetry, which I have to say I think is one of my favorites. Secondly, we're going to be looking at the theme of poetry. Every poem has got a particular theme. We're going to be diving into the tone of poetry. We are going to be looking at the setting. Every poem, it is set in a particular place. Then we are going to be looking at the mood of the poem. Is it a somber poem? Is it a happy and uplifting poem? What is the mood of the poem? We are also going to be exploring different characters of poetry. Some poems have got specific characters or objects. Who is this poem? What is this poem referring to? Then we're going to be looking at the language of poetry, which I know you learned in your English lesson yesterday on certain figures of speech. So when we get to this slide and this section of the lesson, a lot of you should remember some of the content that was covered yesterday. And lastly, we're going to be looking at the symbolism of poetry. So the 8 different components of poetry, we're going to go into detail. Starting off with imagery. Now, imagery, as I mentioned, is my favorite because it allows me, once I've read a poem, because of the language that the poet uses and the beautiful descriptive words and the figure of speeches, and it allows you to really open up all of your senses, and in your mind you're able to see it, you're able to hear it, you're able to smell it, to touch it, to taste it if need be. And that is the beautiful thing about imagery. So we say that imagery is the author's use of language that appeals to the 5 senses in order to help the reader imagine exactly what is being described. So for example, here is a snippet from a poem. It says, Atlantic, then wash ashore on a yellow beach, the color of the sun. How beautiful. Immediately I'm busy picturing by looking at this beach, I can picture the color of this beach, and I can hear the waves as well crashing on the ocean. And that's just imagery, and that's by using words, you start to imagine, your 5 senses come alive. Right, the next component is the theme. Every poem has a particular theme, and it is the key idea explored in the poem. For example, love, friendship, hardship. There can be more than one theme developed in a piece of writing. And so every type of poem has got a particular theme. So it's important to also know what that theme is. Then thirdly, we look at the tone of poetry. And when we refer to tone, we refer to the attitude or emotion of the poet or writer in their writing. If they are talking about death, the tone might be somber or serious. If they're writing about love, there will be more of a happier tone or an uplifting tone with the particular poem. And I always say to my learners that after reading the poem, how does the poem make you feel? Do you feel happy? Do you feel alive? Do you feel maybe questioning? Do you feel sort of sad? Does your heart feel a little bit heavy? How do you feel about the poem? And that's where you'll sort of think about the tone of the poem. And authors have a particular reason why, or a particular tone for that poem, and they do things for a particular reason to sort of open up that feeling and that emotional side of you. Moving on to setting. Now, every poem again also has a particular setting. This is where and when the poem or the story happens. The setting tells us a lot about the poem. For example, if the setting was an old graveyard, it would create a happy atmosphere. If it is set in Hollywood, it's likely to be exciting because there's so many cool things that happen in Hollywood. So there's also a particular setting. Is the poem taking place in a classroom? Is the poem taking place at home? Is it taking place somewhere outside? Where is this poem taking place? Right, then the mood of the poem. So the mood is the feeling or atmosphere created by the poet in a particular time or place. So a poem may begin with a playful atmosphere, but then as the poem develops, the atmosphere could change to eerie or malevolent. So for example, the playground, starting off in a playground of the poem, and it's happy and exciting, and then all of a sudden, the poem then talks about going to the principal's office. So immediately the mood changes from this happy sort of mood to, oh my goodness, what has just happened? So the mood is also an essential aspect of a poem. Then we look at characters. Now, characters are the people in the poem. Often the whole poem permeates around them. The poem may be written from their perspective, or it may be about them. A character's personality is often developed throughout a poem. If we read a poem about certain characters, there's a lot that we can tell about that particular character. And just by the language that is used. And either, as I've just mentioned, the poem is either written about somebody else, about a particular character, or it could be written in the first person of the particular character writing as if they're writing their poem about themselves, for example. So those are the two sort of elements of characters. Then we move on to language. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I know yesterday you learned quite an awesome language lesson, and I know that some of these components that I'm going to bring up now you should remember from yesterday's lesson. So this is quite the popular language that we see in poetry. We see many similes and metaphors. We see lots of onomatopoeias. We see personification. We see hyperboles, we see if the poem rhymes and rhyming words, and then we see lots of alliteration. So different components of language in poetry, and the language is so important because that gives you your image, that sets the mood and the tone, it describes your characters and whatnot. So the language in poetry is such a crucial element in poetry. So it is an important one. And then lastly, we look at symbols and the symbolism in poetry. So a symbol is used in a poem to represent something else. Like a wedding ring is a symbol of love and loyalty. A poem might use symbols to stand for something deeper. Now, this last example I've given here, I'm sure a lot of you can relate. I thought it was a cool example. So a lot of you might know a Rihanna song, Umbrella. I'm not even going to try and sing it because I think I might scare you away and you're not going to come back. But in her song Umbrella, the actual umbrella of the song is a symbol of her protection over the person she is singing to. When she invites them to come under her umbrella, Ella, she means that she will take care of him and shield him from harm. So interesting. So some of you, I'm sure you've heard that song before. It's a very cool song. I am a fan of Rihanna. But the symbol, her umbrella, actually has got quite a good symbolic meaning in the actual song. Right, so now we come to the part of the lesson where we're going to look at an example. And this is a poem called Sick, and it's by Shel Silverstein. And this particular poem, I'm sure some of you can relate. It is a really cool poem, and I'm going to read through it with you. So the poem says, "I cannot go to school today," said little Peggy Ann McKay. "I have the measles and the mumps, a gash, a rash, and purple bumps. My mouth is wet, my throat is dry. I'm going blind in my right eye. My tonsils are as big as rocks. I've counted 16 chicken pox. And there's one more. That's 17. And don't you think my face looks green? My leg is cut. My eyes are blue. It might be instamatic flu. I cough and sneeze and gasp and choke. I'm sure that my left leg is broke. My hips hurt when I move my chin. My belly button is caving in. My back is wrenched. My ankle sprained. My appendix pains each time it rains. My nose is cold, my toes are numb. Have a sliver in my thumb. My neck is stiff, my voice is weak. I hardly whisper when I speak. My tongue is filling up my mouth. I think my hair is falling out. My elbow is bent, my spine isn't straight. My temperature is 108. My brain is shrunk, I cannot hear. There is a hole inside my ear. I have a hangnail, and my heart is... What? What's that? What did you say? You say today is Saturday? Goodbye, I'm going out to play. So, what a fun poem. I like to get animated when I read poems. Right, so this is a typical poem that you could get in your test or as an activity. And today I'm going to be doing 3 multiple choice questions with you. And the remaining questions you'll be doing in your activity that you will find in WorksheetCloud. Right, so if you have a look at question number 1, which word is a synonym for the word wrenched? Now remember, the word synonym means that it has got the same meaning. It's a word that is spelled different, it sounds different, but it's got the same meaning as the word wrenched. So if we have a look where wrenched is, wrenched you can see is the first line in the 3rd stanza. It says, my back is wrenched, my ankle sprained. So the word wrenched, is it A? Does it mean fixed? So if I repeat that sentence and I say, my back is fixed, my ankle sprained. Doesn't quite make sense. B says injured. So let's plug injured in. My back is injured, my ankle sprained. Okay, it sounds like it could work because we're talking about negative things and that's happening to this person's body. C, not painful. My back is not painful, my ankle sprained. I think it's quite painful. And D says my back is straight, my ankle sprained. So out of all of those options, A, B, C, and D, the best option that fits this is going to be B. My back is injured, my ankles sprained. Always remember that in questions that relate to your poem, or have a look at the question and go back to the poem and see where those words are in the poem. Read that line again and see what sort of part of speech it is, what is the language, and what is it in context in relation to the poem. Right, let's look at question number 2. It says, read line 26. What is the speaker trying to say? So line 26 is in the 4th stanza, 2nd line. It says, my temperature is 108. Now, this poem was written by an author that comes from a country where they work in degrees Fahrenheit. Here in South Africa, we work in degrees Celsius. So when we say 108, that is 108 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, it is not degrees Celsius because, interestingly enough, our body temperature, we have a constant body temperature of 37 degrees. For those of you that didn't know, there's an interesting fact. And so when we have a high temperature, it goes a little bit higher than 37 degrees Celsius. It won't go up to 108 degrees Celsius. So this would be 108 degrees Fahrenheit, right? And that is quite a high temperature. It's quite hot. So if we have a look at the different options, option A, the speaker is sick with a high fever. Okay. Option B, the speaker needs medicine to get better soon. Option C, the speaker wants to go to school. So let's read that line again. My temperature is 108. So does it mean that he is sick with a high fever? He or she, she, Peggy and McKay, my apologies. Does it mean that she needs medicine to get better soon? Or does it mean that she really wants to go to school? So in the question it says, we are inferencing. Now, the word inferencing is that we are looking at the text. We're also using our knowledge. So that is what we've just done. We've read the text again. My temperature is 108. We now have the knowledge of temperature and what the body's temperature should normally be. So that is what the word inferencing mean. Looking, thinking, and then looking at our particular answer. And the answer here is going to be A, the speaker is sick with a high fever. Question number 3. After reading the last stanza, the reader can conclude. So now we're drawing a conclusion. that A, the speaker does not feel well and needs medicine. B, the speaker was pretending to be sick in order to miss a day of school. C, the speaker is happy to miss a day of school. Or D, the speaker is starting to feel sick and has to miss a day of school. So there are some options there. I'm going to read the last stanza again. My elbow is bent, my spine isn't straight, my temperature is 108. My brain is shrunk, I cannot hear. There is a hole inside my ear. I have a hangnail and my heart is... What? What's that? What's that you say? You say today is Saturday? Goodbye, I'm going out to play. Okay, so I think it is quite obvious that can't be A. The speaker does not feel well and needs medicine. The speaker is definitely exaggerating about how she is feeling. The speaker, it says she is happy to miss a day of school. Definitely not C. And D, the speaker is starting to feel sick and has to miss school. Nope, the only option is going to be B. The speaker was pretending to be sick in order to miss a day of school. Now, I'm sure many of you are sitting at home thinking, oh, yes, I've done that before. Ah, Miss Kun, I did that. I pretended to be sick so I didn't have to go to school. It's okay. I did when I was younger as well. Anyways, so boys and girls, that is questions 1, 2, and 3. The rest of the questions for this particular poem is in your activity for today. And I am going to end there on our poetry lesson. I really hope that you have enjoyed this lesson. We've learned so much today. We've looked at the 2 different types of poem, free verse and a rhyming poem. We've looked at the 8 components of poetry. We've looked at what exactly is a poem. And I really hope that if some of you are sitting there watching this thinking, before the lesson, I don't enjoy poetry at all. I really hope that now you're starting to get excited about poetry and you're excited as what I am about poetry, because it takes you to a wonderful world. Thank you very much for joining me in today's English lesson. I can't wait to teach you again tomorrow. And before I end off, I just want to remind you that this lesson was brought to you by WorksheetCloud. And if you've got any questions, please email them to grade5@worksheetcloud.com. I'm going to end off today's lesson with saying my favorite saying in the whole world, and that is Hakuna Matata. Now, yes, it is from Lion King, and the reason why it's my favorite is that it's got my surname in the word Hakuna Matata. I'm Miss Kun. I hope you have a wonderful day. Be kind to one another, and I will see you soon. Bye.